We're now 7 months into Donald Trump's second presidency, and I've got to say, there's something really weird, really strange going on. Guess what? Contrary to predictions, the world has not come to an end. The White House has not turned into a hive of Russian control, as famously once predicted by Time magazine, and in fact, Trump is now putting heavy pressure on Vladimir Putin. Meanwhile, the world hasn't just yet been plunged into World War III, and in fact, Trump's strikes against Iran and Abraham Accords diplomacy means that Tehran has been broken away from the Russia-China axis, and even the Arab states are calling on Hamas to lay down its arms. Well, that's another win. But what about the economy? That's the big question. What about the economy? Because it's August 1, Tariff Day, and we here in Australia, well, we've just escaped with only 10% tariffs. Great news for Australia, but also good news for the rest of the world because, you know, when it comes to the tariffs, as someone far greater than I once said, wasn't there supposed to be an earth-shattering kaboom? Or at least a new Great Depression of some sort? Well, let's check in and see how all of these doom and gloom predictions have worked out, shall we?
We've got a stronger than expected GDP number, 3% for the second quarter initial read. That's up from a 0.5% in the first quarter. 2.6% was what was forecast.
Yes, that's right. The U.S. economy, far from being blown up by Trump's madness, is going nuts. Latest figures show that consumer spending in the U.S. is surging and that the GDP grew at an unexpectedly fast clip of 3%, which is a huge rebuke to everyone who predicted that Trump would cause a recession with his policies. Here's a bit more from the boys at the Bloomberg Money Channel, and they make two really good points. Have a listen to this.
The left and people that don't like the president and don't want things to work. And, you know, like Senator Elizabeth Warren will come on and say, inflation's out of control and the economy is getting killed by what's happening by these tariffs. This 3% with the market at new highs, and really we haven't seen inflation, you know, go up back to 3%. Maybe it will this week. Maybe we'll see it. But none of these horrible things have happened, but they still talk like it's happening. It's amazing.
Well, there's an important lesson there. Don't pick a congressman to be your money manager. That's what I would say. But in the end, Congress has their own reasons to point out certain things. And the Democrats, of course, as you pointed out, really don't want to see the current administration have some success.
And that's the critical point right there. I mean, one, most people in Congress, doomsayers on both sides, don't actually know a lot about how the economy and about how money really works. But the second point is even more important. Democrats, and that includes a lot of the media, want Trump to fail. Indeed, I had to laugh at this from the New York Times, or as Trump calls it, the failing New York Times, as they tried to come to grips with what was going on in the economy right now. Let me read the first couple of sentences of their report on the GDP numbers. And I tell you what, it's like something out of the Ministry of Truth in George Orwell's 1984. Here we go. I quote, "Economic growth softened in the first half of the year as tariffs and uncertainty upended business plans and scrambled consumers' spending decisions." The article went on to say, gross domestic product, adjusted for inflation, increased at a 3% annual rate in the second quarter, the Commerce Department said on Wednesday. So, put those two paragraphs together. Did you get that? The New York Times is telling us that the economy is both slowing and surging ahead all at the same time. You see, what most of the media, including the New York Times, cannot understand is that what Trump is doing with his tariffs is actually rebalancing an international trade order that had gotten completely lopsided and which saw only free trade as an end in itself, not as something that was supposed to be good or bad for a country in particular its voters. Now, this rebalancing has always been Trump's agenda. He talked about this a long time before he got into politics, about protecting America and Americans from a sort of libertarian ideology that says Who cares if you don't have jobs or industry or steel mills, if everyone can get a slightly cheaper fridge from Mexico or an electric car from China? This was, of course, Trump recognized it, the road to ruin. Yet now, all of that, it's turning around, and certainly these Ohio steelworkers are happy about what's going on.
Tariffs are definitely going to help this industry. We saw it first time Trump was in office, and it was the right thing to do.
If it makes us grow, profitable, gives us more money, let's do it. Let's make this country great.
And U.S. Trade Representative Jamie Greer broke down how this works after the Trump administration inked a trade deal with the EU a few days ago. The idea, he said, is to, and what a novel idea this is, to encourage overseas companies to invest and build manufacturing capabilities in the U.S., thus supporting American jobs.
Our expectation, and frankly European companies' desire, is that they come here for a lot of greenfield investment. In other words, new investment for new factories to service this market. Remember, we're keeping a 15% tariff on the European Union, and so it's naturally in the interest of European companies to come in, build here for this market. And you know, we welcome that kind of investment where it's a new factory with new jobs, and that's what we expect to be coming.
And as those GDP numbers and as those Ohio steelworkers know, this strategy is starting to pay dividends, which, let's be fair, is also starting to be noticed in some places you wouldn't have expected it. Now, I don't know how this slipped through the Politburo, but even at the New York Times, yes, the New York Times, which I just took to task before for their news report, well, their opinion columnist, Bret Stephens, managed to get this piece up saying, actually, things aren't so bad. He wrote, and again he got this in the New York Times, he said, egads, after a disastrous first 100 days, Donald Trump is starting to have a much more successful presidency. This is not what we, his foam-at-the-mouth critics, had planned or perhaps secretly hoped for. Stephens went on to list a number of successes from the southern border to foreign policy to, yes, the economy. But I think that Stephens does, to his credit, does a valuable service here with this, because he has admitted the truth of the matter. Many on the left want Trump to fail, and by extension, they want America to fail. Well, what's the old saying? The first step is admitting that you have a problem. Baby steps, Brett. Baby steps.